researchers. I have published more than 700 peer-reviewed articles. Although I am a physician scientist, I need to point out that I am not, as Dr. Carpenter is, an expert on cell phones and cancer risk. As history tells us, there are examples where delays in reducing exposure to cancer-causing substances have led to large increases in cancer. Tobacco use is one striking example. Mindful of lessons learned, the UPCI's Center for Environmental Oncology began a process more than a year ago of reviewing evidence on the possible association of brain cancer with the long-term use of cell phones. During this process, I became aware of a growing body of scientific evidence indicating that long-term frequent use of cell phones, which receive and emit radio frequency RF signals, may be associated with an increased risk of brain tumors, including malignant gliomas, the type of tumor that Senator Kennedy recently developed, as well as Dr. Marks. This particularly concerned me since in the United States today, more than 9 out of every 10 adults uses a cell phone, a remarkable number that has doubled in just the past 5 years. Worldwide, there are 3 billion regular cell phone users, including a growing number of children. Generally speaking, it is important to stress that children are not just little adults. They often are much more vulnerable to the effects of environmental exposures. For cell phones, this matters because the skull of children is much less dense than the skull of adults, and modeling research has shown that cell phone RF signals are absorbed much deeper into the brains of children. In contrast to the United States, as Dr. Carpenter has pointed out, in the Scandinavian countries, widespread cell phone use has been prevalent for more than 2 decades. Dr. Leonard Hardell, a distinguished oncologist, finds that people who have used cell phones the most have double the chance of developing malignant brain tumors and also tumors on the hearing nerve called acoustic neuromas. Dr. Hardell has also, as Dr. Carpenter just summarized, recently reported that teenagers who use cell phones have 5 times more brain tumors by the age of 29. I recognize that many studies do not show any association, but most of these negative studies have followed people for a relatively short period of time. It seems likely that brain cancer can take 10 or more years to develop. In addition, few studies have controlled for cordless phone use, and these cordless phones also release RF signals. In population-based research, clearly methods always matter. My concerns about the risk for developing brain tumors from long-term cell phone use, and my particular concern about risks for children, coupled with the knowledge that experts in several other countries had issued precautionary advisories, led me to issue an advisory in July to our physicians, scientists, and staff. The advice was straightforward and has been widely shared by colleagues and news outlets around the world. Within a week of the distribution of the precautionary memo to our staff, the Israeli Health Ministry endorsed our recommendations. Our warning has also been translated into German, Portuguese, and Spanish. Our advisory recommends that you use cell phones, but carefully. Don't keep them turned on and on your body all the time. Use an earpiece, a headset, or a speakerphone mode. Based on the current body of evidence, as a physician scientist who has devoted my life to preventing cancer and saving lives, I cannot tell this committee that cell phones are definitely dangerous, but I certainly cannot tell you that they are safe. How are we going to resolve this important matter? Should we simply wait and watch, or should we take simple precautions while we undertake additional, more definitive research that will tell the whole story? I urge this committee to work collaboratively with the cell phone industry so that independent researchers at our institution, MD Anderson Cancer Institute, and the National Cancer Institute and the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences will be better able to produce the best, most accurate study of cell phone use and health effects. The future of our children and grandchildren, I believe, demands that we work together to understand the potential risks from cell phones and, if necessary, to develop effective solutions to reduce future health threats. And in closing, I would just say that I find the old adage to be better safe than sorry to be very apt for this situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huberman. I want to note that Congressman Burton from Indiana is with us, and in a previous Congress, he was chairman of the full committee. So I appreciate Mr. Burton's presence here. Dr. Hoover, you may proceed, and then after Dr. Hoover, we are going to go to questions of the witnesses. Thank you very much. Make sure that Dr. Hoover's microphone is on. You want to test that?
All right. I'm Bob Hoover. I'm the director of the Epidemiology and Biostatistics program at the National Cancer Institute, and I'll be talking briefly about the scientific evidence on the topic of cell phones and risk of brain cancer. While as an epidemiologist, I'll be focusing today on studies of risk in human populations, it is also important to note that on the biologic side, radio frequency radiation from cell phones is billions of times lower than the energy of X-ray photons. As such, its effect on the body, at least at this time, appears to be insufficient to produce genetic damage typically associated with developing cancer. Alternative mechanisms have been suggested, but to date, no alternative mechanism of how this exposure might result in cancer has been vetted adequately. From the epidemiologic side, descriptive data from the large network of population-based tumor registries funded by the National Cancer Institute reveal that there has been no increase in the incidence of brain or other nervous system cancers from 1987 through 2005, a time period when cell phone use increased by about tenfold. From the analytics side, the earliest analytic epidemiologic studies, including one conducted by the National Cancer Institute, self-reported frequency and patterns of cell phone use were compared between patients diagnosed with brain or nervous system tumors, known as cases, and patients or controls with other diseases, an investigation known as a case control study. These studies found no convincing evidence of association between cell phone use and glioma, a malignant tumor of the brain, or from an angioma or acoustic neuroma, two largely benign tumors of the nervous system. These early studies pointed out that future investigations would be needed to evaluate potential effect of long-term use as well as changing cell phone technology. As a result, a new generation of cell phone studies is emerging. However, brain cancer is a very difficult disease to study well epidemiologically. Much of the disease is rapidly fatal, and the tumor and its treatment can impair cognitive function. Cases may cooperate at different rates than controls, and answers to questions may be altered in someone who knows they have a specific condition. Given all of this, it is not surprising that there is a fair amount of inconsistency within and between many of these studies, both in quality and in findings. Because of this, I'll focus only on the larger and better designed of these studies. Perhaps the most notable of these is a large collaborative project that includes individual studies from 13 countries, collectively known as Interphone. Analyses of data from individual centers and those pooled from some but not all of the individual countries have been published. These individual studies have found no evidence of an overall increase in the risk of any type of brain tumors associated with the first 10 years of cell phone use. In addition, no increased risk has been found in relation to several measures of exposure, including time since first use, lifetime years of use, the number of calls, the hours of use, and the use of analog versus digital phones. A somewhat increased risk has been found in some studies for tumors diagnosed on the same side of the head the cell phone was used for those with more than 10 years of cell phone use. But these are based on small numbers, generally less than 5% of the cases under study, and are not consistently seen across all the studies. Many of us are hopeful that the combined interphone analysis, including all the centers in the original study, which is now underway, will provide a much larger number of long-term users, which will allow an evaluation of different